The Hartwell Funeral Parlor. Part 1. The Inspection. Studio microphone, hook, opening voiceover style. In the fall of 1823, something dark was growing beneath the surface of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. A peaceful farming town, where folks knew each other by name, suddenly found itself in the grip of fear. 17 people dead in just 3 months. All from different families, different ages, some old, some young, some in perfect health, but there was one thing they all had in common. Every single body was prepared for burial by the Hartwell Funeral Parlor. What the town didn't know was that behind the parlor's stone walls, beneath the polished wood floors and soft prayers, a dark truth had taken root. A truth that would only begin to surface when a traveling doctor showed up and asked one question too many. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Studio microphone, main story, narration begins. The town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, in 1823, was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked at night. A quiet community of just 300 people, it sat tucked away in the rolling green hills of southeastern Pennsylvania. People there lived simple lives, farming, raising families, attending church on Sundays, and helping neighbors when times got tough. No one expected evil to live among them. But evil doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes, it wears a kind smile and offers you a warm cup of soup. The Hartwell family. The Hartwell Funeral Parlor had been in business for over 20 years. Run by Ezekiel Hartwell, a tall, soft-spoken man who had moved to Millbrook in 1801 with his wife Martha, their 2 sons Josiah and Caleb, daughter Rebecca, and Martha's elderly father Thomas Creed. Before the Hartwells came, families handled death on their own, building coffins, washing the bodies. But Ezekiel offered something different: dignity, care, and professional embalming. At first, the townspeople were wary. But over time, his gentle manner and low prices earned their trust. By 1823, the Hartwells handled nearly every death in the area. Rich or poor, blacksmith or preacher, it didn't matter. They treated every body with the same quiet respect. Their home was a large 3-story stone building at the edge of town. The family lived on the main floor, which also served as the viewing area. Upstairs were the bedrooms. Down in the basement, the preparation room, where the real work was done. Next to the house sat a barn where Caleb built the coffins, and a small cemetery for those who couldn't afford plots elsewhere. People spoke highly of the Hartwells. Some even called them angels of mercy. But that fall, the angels stopped answering prayers. Enter Drive, Harrison. On October 15, 1823, a traveling physician named Drive Samuel Harrison arrived in Millbrook. He was sent by the state to perform health inspections in rural areas. It was routine work: check the water supply, inspect food storage, and, if necessary, review how the dead were being handled. When he arrived at the Hartwell Funeral Parlor, he was greeted kindly by Ezekiel and his oldest son, Josiah. They gave him a full tour: spotless preparation tables, jars of embalming fluid, and even some modern equipment imported from the city. Everything looked perfect, until Drive Harrison asked to see the bodies. There were 3 being prepared for burial that week. The first body. The first was Eleanor Fairchild, a 68-year-old widow. Cause of death: consumption, or so they said. But as Dr. Harrison gently examined her, he noticed faint bruises along her neck. They were almost hidden by the collar of her burial dress. Circular, uniform, not the marks of disease. More like the marks of hands. Josiah explained quickly, "We must have positioned her wrong. It's post-mortem bruising, from the embalming table." Dr. Harrison nodded politely, but his gut told him something was off. The second body. Next was Marcus Webb, a strong 42-year-old farmer who reportedly died from a sudden heart attack. But under closer inspection, Drive Harrison found small puncture wounds on his arms and chest. Too deliberate, too clean. When asked, Ezekiel claimed Marcus had fallen on his tools while collapsing. But the doctor had seen plenty of farm accidents. These wounds didn't match. The third body. Finally, there was Mary Patterson, a 26-year-old mother of 2. Her death was blamed on a sudden fever. But Drive Harrison found something horrifying: a white powder residue on her lips and beneath her fingernails. He recognized it immediately: arsenic. Poison. Something was very wrong. As the examination ended, Drive Harrison noticed the atmosphere had changed. Martha Hartwell stood in the kitchen doorway, her eyes cold. Rebecca, young and sweet-looking, stared at him without blinking. Caleb, usually quiet, blocked the basement door when the doctor stepped too close to a leather-bound journal. In that brief moment, Drive, Harrison saw the edge of a page, with detailed notes about the health, finances, and family members of various townspeople. Why would a funeral home need that kind of information? The basement secrets. Dr. Harrison insisted on seeing the basement preparation room again. There, he found glass jars lined up along the walls. Some filled with clear liquid. Some cloudy. A few containing human organs, preserved in chemical solution. Ezekiel claimed it was for educational study. To learn from the dead, he said. But some of the organs looked too fresh. Some had clean surgical cuts, as if someone had been practicing. The town begins to whisper. That night, shaken, Drive, Harrison returned to the Millbrook Inn to write his report. But word of his visit had already spread. Several townsfolk came to speak with him in whispers. They had doubts, fears, strange memories. One woman, Sarah Pemberton, shared a chilling story. Her mother had been perfectly healthy, until Martha Hartwell started visiting, bringing homemade soup. Within 3 days, her mother was dead. The Hartwells waived their fee, out of kindness, they said. But Sarah now wondered, was it kindness, or something else? The beginning of the end. Dr. Harrison's discoveries were just the beginning. The Hartwells had built their business on death. But some believed they had learned how to feed off it, in more ways than one. And in the shadows of that stone house, with its quiet hallways and watchful family, something dark had been growing for years. Now, it was ready to come into the light. Bell closing call to action. If you thought this first part was chilling, just wait. In the next episode, we uncover what was really written in the Hartwell journal, and why some townspeople began to disappear without explanation. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell icon, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know, do you believe the Hartwells were hiding something far worse than poison and bruises? This is just the beginning of the nightmare. Studio microphone. The Hartwell funeral parlor. Part 2. The Journal of the Dead. Studio microphone. Opening hook. Voiceover style. What if the family who helped you bury your loved one were the very ones who took their life? What if every warm smile, every pie brought to your door, every prayer whispered at a funeral was part of a carefully planned deception? In the fall of 1823, Drive, Samuel Harrison came to Millbrook, Pennsylvania expecting a simple inspection. Instead, he uncovered a trail of death that stretched back more than 20 years. This is not just a story of murder. It's a story of betrayal, obsession, and a family that turned death into an art. Now, let me tell you what really happened when the Hartwells came to town in 1801. Studio microphone. Main story begins. The Hartwells weren't born in Millbrook. They came from the hills of Western Virginia in 1801, arriving with polished manners, mysterious wealth, and a profession most folks didn't trust at the time, death care. They bought a large stone house on the edge of town. Paid in gold coins, too many for a modest family. Said Ezekiel learned the trade from his uncle in Richmond. No one asked too many questions. But that first winter in Millbrook, 8 people died from what the town called a wasting sickness. Every one of them prepared for burial by the newly opened Hartwell funeral parlor. No one raised alarms. It was winter, people got sick. But looking back, some families remembered how fast their loved ones declined after the Hartwells showed up. How eager the family was to handle everything. How they discouraged second opinions. Still, in a close-knit town, people chalked it up to bad luck and grief. The Hartwells were kind, generous, always offering help during hard times. No one suspected what they were hiding just beneath their floorboards. Studio microphone. The hidden room. During Drive, Harrison's first inspection, he had examined the basement, but he didn't see everything. Because behind one of those stone walls was a false panel. And behind that, a private laboratory of death. Glass jars, deadly poisons, surgical tools far too advanced for a funeral home. And most terrifying of all, anatomical sketches and detailed notes about the deaths of dozens of people. It wasn't just embalming, it was experimentation, and in the center of it all, hidden beneath a dusty cloth, was a leather-bound journal. Not the little glimpse Drive Harrison saw on his first visit, this was the full thing. Page after page, written by multiple hands over 20 years. It didn't just list names. It described methods, doses, symptoms, Final breaths. Dash dash dash. Studio microphone. The pattern of murder. The journal proved something chilling. The Hartwells had been perfecting the act of murder for years. And they were good at it. They chose their victims carefully. Elderly people with no close family. Lonely neighbors. Poor farmers who wouldn't be missed. And they made sure to space out the deaths. Never too many at once. Never the same method twice. One entry stood out, written by Josiah Hartwell, the elder son. It described how they lured Marcus Webb, the farmer dry. Harrison had examined in part 1. Josiah had invited him over under the excuse of planning a coffin for someone else. Once inside, they tested a new combination of sedatives and puncture instruments. His death was staged as a heart attack. They even recorded how long it took him to die. How his body responded. What they'd improve next time. Dash dash dash. Studio microphone. A family of killers. Each family member had a role. Ezekiel, the patriarch, was the organizer. Calm, cold, methodical. Martha, his wife, was the community face, baking pies, offering help, sneaking poison into soup and tea. Josiah and Caleb, the sons, handled the bodies. Strong, quiet, capable of doing things most couldn't imagine. And Rebecca, sweet little Rebecca, just 19, she had become the family's eyes. She'd smile at church socials, ask innocent questions, and report back who was vulnerable, who was alone, who might die without much fuss. They had turned murder into a business. And death into a science. Dash dash dash. Studio microphone. The betrayer in their midst. But someone had seen too much. Someone had grown sick of the lies. Thomas Creed, Martha Hartwell's aging father, was supposed to be dying. He'd been losing weight, feeling sick, weak. But it wasn't old age, it was poison. Slowly, over months, the same kind they used on others. And Thomas knew it. On Dr. Harrison's second night in Millbrook, Thomas requested a private meeting. Claimed he needed a medical consultation. They met in the stable behind the inn, away from the family. That's when the old man's mask dropped. I know what you saw, Thomas whispered, eyes darting. You're right about the bruises, the poison, the punctures. But you don't understand the full picture. For the next hour, Thomas Creed told Drive Harrison everything. Dash dash dash. Studio microphone. The origin of the nightmare. According to Thomas, it all began with grave robbing. In 1801, after the Hartwells arrived, Ezekiel realized he could dig up freshly buried bodies and steal valuables, rings, gold teeth, silk clothes. It started as greed, but it didn't stop there. In 1807, they accidentally killed a sick man while robbing him. But the town believed he died of illness. That's when the family discovered a terrible truth. If they did it carefully, no one would suspect a thing. And so they began choosing victims. Studying their behavior, testing poisons, refining methods, and writing it all down in the journal. Over 16 years, they had killed more than 40 people. Some buried in cemeteries, others hidden in a mass grave in the woods behind the house, a pit that held the bones of travelers, widows, even children. Dash dash dash. Studio microphone. A desperate plan. Creed's betrayal came not just from guilt, but fear. He knew the family was planning to kill him. His usefulness as a test subject was over. And he was ready to escape, if Dr. Harrison would help. The plan was risky. On Sunday morning, while the Hartwells were at church, Drive, Harrison would use a key Creed provided to enter the basement lab. He would collect the journal and any other evidence. Creed would disappear at the same time, slipping away to a cousin's home in Philadelphia. Dr. Harrison would flee town that night, with the proof he needed. It had to happen quickly. The Hartwells already suspected him. If they caught wind of the plan, they'd kill them both. Dash dash dash. Studio microphone. The morning of reckoning. That Sunday morning dawned cold and gray. The church bell rang through the misty fields. The Hartwells, dressed in their best, walked down the dirt road with the rest of Millbrook's citizens. Inside their home, the fire was out. The shutters were drawn, and Dr. Harrison stepped carefully through the front door, key trembling in his hand. He made his way down to the basement, pulled open the false wall. And there it was. The truth. The full journal. Shelves of poison, tools, bones, drawings of human anatomy, marked with ink and blood. A row of jars, each labeled with a name, and a date of death. Dash dash dash. Studio microphone. Cliffhanger ending. As Dr. Harrison began stuffing the journal pages into his satchel, he heard something upstairs. A creak, a door, footsteps. The family wasn't at church. They were home, and now, they knew. Dash dash dash. Bell closing call to action. The trap has been sprung. Dr. Harrison has the truth, but can he escape with it? In Part 3, the Hartwells close in, and a deadly game of cat and mouse begins in the very house where dozens had died before. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and tell us in the comments, how far would you go to expose the truth? This nightmare is only just beginning. Sometimes, the most trusted homes hide the darkest secrets. And the families we admire most, may be hiding rooms filled with horror. Main narrative. Part 3, The Hidden Room Beneath the Funeral Home. Dr. Samuel Harrison sat alone in his rented room, alternately reviewing his medical notes and questioning the sanity of the plan he had agreed to undertake. The evidence Thomas Creed had described, the journal, the preserved specimens, the hidden graves, it all sounded like something out of a nightmare. And now, he was the one tasked with uncovering it. Creed had given him precise instructions for how to access the Hartwell family's secret laboratory during their absence at church. As respected members of Millbrook's Methodist congregation, the Hartwells never missed Sunday service. That gave Harrison just under 3 hours. 3 hours to expose a family of killers, or die trying. Creed's key was small, ornate, an odd thing with swirling engravings. It was meant to open a concealed panel in the basement wall. Behind it, the old man claimed, was the proof: jars of preserved organs, diagrams of living dissections, poisons, and a detailed murder journal, along with a map showing where the Hartwells had buried the bodies of their victims. As the church bells rang out across Millbrook, Harrison stood hidden in the woods, watching the family walk toward town. Ezekiel wore a black coat, tall and stately, like a preacher. Martha, in her blue dress with a crisp white collar, looked every inch the respectable mother. The children, Josiah, Caleb, and Rebecca, followed with practiced grace. They smiled. They waved. They looked like any other God-fearing family. And that was the most chilling part. Tension rises. Harrison waited 30 minutes. Then he moved quickly and quietly toward the stone funeral home, the leaves crunching beneath his boots. The building loomed before him, silent and cold in the late autumn light. Inside, the basement looked exactly as it had during his previous inspection: clean, orderly, even sterile. Embalming tables were spotless, chemicals neatly stored. The few corpses under white sheets looked peaceful, untouched. But Harrison didn't stop at the surface. He searched the basement walls one by one, tapping for hollows, testing for seams, until finally, the small key slid into an invisible slot in the stone. A quiet click, the panel opened, and what lay beyond was a chamber of horrors. Audience prompt. Whispered, if this is making your heart race, you're not alone. Share this video with a friend who loves true horror, and keep watching. It gets worse. The secret laboratory. The hidden room stretched far wider than he expected, under the entire house, and beyond into the hillside. Shelves lined the walls, filled with glass jars, hundreds of them. Each one held something human. Hearts, livers, brains, all floating in thick liquid, each one labeled with names, dates, and notes. In the center stood a heavy wooden lectern. Upon it sat the murder journal. The book was thick and old, its leather worn and stained. Harrison opened it with shaking hands. The entries were clinical, cold, scientific. Each page listed the victim, how they were lured in, how they were killed, and most disturbingly, how they responded. It wasn't just about murder. It was about experimentation. He saw the progression, from simple poisonings, to anatomical dissections, to surgical trials on living victims. The entries spanned over 2 decades. And then he saw something even more terrifying. The killings didn't stop at Millbrook. The Hartwells had committed murders in 6 other townships, often while traveling to offer funeral services to distant clients. They had a system, a method for picking vulnerable targets, waiting months, and then striking. On the next shelf, anatomical sketches revealed even more horrors: precise drawings of mutilated bodies, experiments to test fear responses, and worst of all, diagrams showing which methods cause the most suffering, segmented by age, gender, and health. Cliffhanger moment. Then, footsteps. Voices. The family had returned early from church. Harrison checked his pocket watch. He'd been inside for nearly 2.5 hours. Trapped. No time to escape through the basement door. They'd be there any minute. He looked around in panic. And that's when he saw it, another door. Narrow, hidden behind a stack of specimen jars. With no other choice, he opened it, and stepped into a pitch-black tunnel. Engagement break. Just when you think the secrets of the Hartwell family can't get darker, they do. Make sure you've subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. Let's keep going. The tunnel and the tomb. The tunnel was old, hand-carved, the walls rough and uneven, but clearly expanded over time. By the flickering light of a candle, Harrison moved deeper into the hill. At the end of the passage, a cave. A massive, natural cavern. But this wasn't just any cave. It was a graveyard. Bones were everywhere, some stacked, others carelessly tossed. Dozens of bodies in various states of decay. Some still wore jewelry, others, torn clothes. Some had clearly been dissected. Others looked peaceful, as if they'd simply vanished from life. There were at least 40 victims in this one place. In one corner, newer bodies had been arranged like trophies. Harrison recognized a few. They were people whose funerals he had recently overseen, victims he had assumed died naturally. But they hadn't. The Hartwells had murdered them, dismembered them, studied them, and kept them. Climactic tension. Then, voices echoed through the tunnel behind him, calling his name, not with worry, not with fear, but with the patience of hunters tracking prey. Harrison ran. The cave system was deep, but blessedly, it had another exit, a narrow shaft that led up and out into the wooded hillside. From there, he saw the Hartwells circling the property like predators. He wasn't the first to discover their secret, but maybe, he would be the first to survive it. He fled Millbrook that night, carrying nothing but his medical bag and the evidence he had managed to document. Traveling cross-country on foot, he avoided roads, stayed off main trails, and trusted no one. He had to make it to Philadelphia. To tell someone, to stop them, but back in Millbrook, the Hartwells were already destroying everything. End with a chilling promise. They emptied the chamber, collapsed the cave, burned the records, and disappeared. By the time Harrison reached the authorities, the Hartwells were gone. Vanished. But what happened next will shake the foundations of every small town they ever touched. Because this was only the beginning. Call to action. If this tale sent a shiver down your spine, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys dark, historical horror. Part 4 of the Hartwell funeral parlor is coming soon, and trust me, the horror has just begun. We'll see you in the next video. Imagine surviving a house of horrors, only to discover the monsters have vanished without a trace. But what if they weren't finished? What if they were just moving on? Main narrative. Part 4, The Vanishing of the Hartwells. Dr. Samuel Harrison arrived in Philadelphia 3 days after fleeing Millbrook, exhausted, mud-covered, and clutching a medical bag filled with horrors. He had risked everything. Inside his bag were pages from the murder journal, anatomical sketches, and notes he'd scribbled about the cave of bodies. He demanded an audience with the city's chief investigator, and his account left even hardened officials speechless. But by the time a team was dispatched to Millbrook, it was already too late. The Hartwell funeral parlor was empty. Gone. The family had vanished. Tension builds. Neighbors told a polite, heartwarming story. Ezekiel, they said, had received an urgent letter. His brother in Ohio was gravely ill. The family packed quickly, told everyone they'd be gone for several months, and asked the town to keep an eye on the funeral home in their absence. No one questioned it. Why would they? The Hartwells were respected, trusted, beloved. But Harrison knew better. And what the townspeople didn't know, was that the Hartwells had spent that final night destroying everything. The secret chamber had been emptied, the preserved organs removed, the murder journal's remaining pages burned. The cave, partially collapsed with gunpowder and stone. Tools, documents, even the hidden poison stores, gone. Every piece of evidence that could connect them to their crimes, erased. Audience prompt. Slow and ominous. If this is your first time hearing the Hartwell story, buckle in. Because the family's next move is even more terrifying. Make sure you're subscribed, and stay with us. We're going deeper. Community reaction and fracture. When authorities finally arrived in Millbrook, all they found was a shuttered funeral home and a town that didn't want to believe what they were hearing. How could the Hartwells have done this? Neighbors asked. They buried our children, sat in our pews, hosted socials in their parlor. The evidence drive Harrison provided was chilling, but incomplete. The fragments of the journal, the sketches, the story of the cave, without bodies or confessions, it felt like a ghost story. The few remains investigators did recover from the half-collapsed cave were badly decomposed. Too few, too old, impossible to identify. Without the Hartwells present, the case grew cold. Thomas Creed's disappearance was chalked up to senility. Poor old man must have wandered into the woods, the family had said before leaving. No one ever found his body. But Harrison knew what had happened. And it haunted him. Rising mystery and obsession. He couldn't let it go. Over the next year, Harrison wrote detailed reports for state officials. He submitted everything: his evidence, his eyewitness accounts, the names of the Hartwells, and the locations of their suspected crimes. But bureaucracy is slow. Files were buried. Investigators had other priorities. So he took matters into his own hands. Harrison became a man obsessed. Wherever he traveled as a physician, he looked for patterns: strange deaths, missing persons, traveling undertakers. And soon, he started noticing them. Dark pattern emerges. In 1824, disappearances were reported in a small Ohio town, days after a new funeral family arrived, going by a different name. In 1825, it happened again in Indiana. Then Illinois. Then the Missouri Territory. Each time, it was the same pattern: a respected family, a funeral parlor, a spike in sudden deaths, and then, silence. By the time Harrison alerted the authorities, the family was gone again, vanished like ghosts. The Hartwells had learned to cover their tracks, to change their names, to blend in. Each new town was a fresh hunting ground. Each new identity, a clean slate. Audience engagement prompt, whispered. How many lives could they have taken? And what would it take to finally stop them? Comment below what you would do if your town trusted someone like the Hartwells. We're not finished yet. Millbrook never recovered. Back in Millbrook, the damage had already been done. Even after the funeral home was converted into a general store, townspeople avoided it. Some swore the basement was cursed. Others believed the cave still held more bodies. No one wanted to know for sure. The town had been broken, its innocence shattered. Friends stopped trusting friends. People kept to themselves. Children weren't allowed to roam after dark. The name Hartwell became taboo. By 1860, Millbrook was abandoned entirely. The forest reclaimed it. Today, only the stone shell of the funeral home remains, hidden among trees. No signs, no markers. But the evil that was born there didn't die. Closing build up to Part 5. Dr. Harrison continued his lonely mission for decades, tracking the Hartwells from town to town, state to state. Each time, he arrived too late. But in 1847, everything changed. A letter arrived from Oregon Territory. A sheriff had found something horrible. A new funeral family, a different name, but the same old evil. And this time, they were caught. End with a hook and CTA. In Part 5, we reveal the shocking truth about what the Hartwells were doing out west, and how they finally confessed to one of the longest and deadliest murder sprees in American history. If this story chilled you, hit that like button, share it with someone who loves dark mysteries, and subscribe now so you never miss an episode. Evil hides behind the kindest faces, and this family proves it. They ran for over 2 decades, from Pennsylvania to the edge of the continent. But evil can't run forever. And when the Hartwells finally slipped, the truth they confessed shook America to its core. Main narrative. Part 5, The Oregon Confession. It was a cold, gray morning in the Oregon Territory when Sheriff Elijah Banning unlocked a door that would change history. He had received complaints from locals, strange smells from a nearby hill, unmarked graves, missing settlers. All traced back to one family. The Caldwells. They were respected undertakers in a small, growing town. Charming, polite, helpful. They'd even hosted prayer meetings in their parlor. But something didn't sit right. Too many quick funerals. Too many families silenced by grief, or fear. Sheriff Banning had seen this kind of pattern before, once, in an old case file from Pennsylvania. A case file that mentioned a drive. Samuel Harrison. He pulled the report from federal archives, read the details, and realized with a chill. The Caldwells were the Hartwells. Tension builds. A quiet raid was planned. No warning, no room for escape. Deputies surrounded the Caldwell funeral parlor just before dawn. Inside, they found what drive Harrison had described decades earlier: a hidden laboratory, anatomical drawings, jars of preserved organs, and a map. A map that marked dozens of burial sites across Oregon. In the cellar, they uncovered 30 bodies. fresh. Some were settlers from the town. Others were travelers who had vanished on their way west. Some victims still had their jewelry. Others bore signs of experimentation. The Hartwell operation hadn't stopped. It had evolved. Chilling confessions. The family was arrested without resistance. Ezekiel Hartwell, now calling himself Ezekiel Caldwell, was 73 years old. Frail in appearance, but sharp as ever. His eyes were cold, unbothered. During questioning, he confessed to everything. No remorse, no shame. He spoke like a professor describing an experiment. Over 3 decades, the family had killed more than 120 people. 8 states, 4 new identities, 1 purpose. They saw themselves not as killers, but as researchers. As entrepreneurs. As pioneers of something darker than science. Audience prompt. Spoken slowly and dramatically. They kept records, maps, journals, and apprentices. Yes, you heard right. The Hartwells weren't alone. If this is giving you chills, pause and share this video with someone who loves true historical horror. Subscribe, because this story is far from over. Family breakdown and fate. Each family member confessed in their own way. Martha Hartwell, calm and matronly, said. She had always known the truth, she just chose to follow Ezekiel's vision. Josiah, now in his late 40s, spoke in cold, clinical detail. His drawings of surgical techniques were horrifyingly advanced. Caleb, who had always been more follower than leader, wept during questioning. He claimed he'd wanted to leave, but couldn't. Rebecca, still in her early 30s, said she had been brainwashed, forced into it by her family. But her journal entries told a different story. She had been one of the most meticulous note-takers. One of the most methodical killers. Public response and justice. News of their arrest spread quickly. From Oregon to Philadelphia, headlines blazed. Family of undertakers confessed a 30-year murder spree. Communities across the country began re-examining their pasts. Old deaths were questioned. Unsolved disappearances reopened. Dozens of families finally got answers. Some found closure. Others found only grief. In December of 1847, Ezekiel Hartwell was hanged in Salem, Oregon. Martha and Josiah were executed days later. Caleb was sentenced to life in prison. He died of pneumonia in 1852. Rebecca received a 20-year sentence, but died in prison in 1851. The Hartwell name, once synonymous with care and professionalism, became a symbol of deception and horror. Emotional reflection. And what of Dr. Harrison? He received the letter from Sheriff Banning that same winter. Now in his 70s, weak from years of obsession and travel, he made one final journey, across the continent, to confront the man who had haunted his thoughts for over 2 decades. In the final moments before Ezekiel's hanging, the 2 men spoke briefly. Ezekiel looked at Harrison and smiled. I always wondered how you survived, Doctor, he said. Most didn't. Then he added something that would haunt Harrison until his final breath. There are others, you know. We weren't the only ones. We taught others. Trained them. Just wait. You'll see. Audience prompt. Whispered. Could it be true? Were there more families like the Hartwells? If so, where did they go? Comment below what you think happened next. And stay with us, because the story isn't over. Transition to Part 6 Hook. In Part 6, we explore what Harrison uncovered in the final years of his life, how he spent his last days chasing whispers of hidden families, secret funerals, and buried victims. Did the Hartwell legacy truly end with the hangings in Oregon? Or had they planted seeds across a growing nation? Join us next time as we dig deeper into America's forgotten graves. NCTA. If this story chilled you, tap the like button, subscribe for more dark historical mysteries, and share it with someone who dares to question the past. Because the past is never truly buried. They confessed. They were hanged. But the story didn't end there. Because just before Ezekiel Hartwell took his final breath, he whispered a warning. We weren't the only ones. Main narrative. Part 6, The Apprentice Legacy. In the cold early months of 1848, Samuel Harrison returned to Philadelphia a changed man. He had seen justice served, but he had also heard something that robbed him of sleep. There are others, we trained them. Those words weren't a threat. They were a promise. Ezekiel Hartwell had admitted to training apprentices, young men and women taught to carry on the family's legacy in other states, under new names, with fresh identities. Dr. Harrison had no proof, no names, no locations. Just a gut-wrenching feeling. A fear that the evil he had chased for decades hadn't been destroyed. It had been scattered. The search begins again. Despite his age and poor health, Harrison returned to his life on the road. Not as a physician now, but as a shadow investigator. He quietly visited small towns across Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, speaking with local sheriffs, reading death records, asking questions no one else thought to ask. He looked for the signs. Funeral homes that arrived overnight and left without notice. Families with no history who were suddenly beloved pillars of the community. Sudden illnesses that swept through towns with no clear cause. Burials with no clergy, no relatives, no questions. And slowly, patterns began to form. Dark clues across the frontier. In a town near the Mississippi River, Harrison heard rumors of a doctor who traveled alone, offering free health inspections, and then vanishing after 3 deaths. In a Missouri settlement, he found a funeral parlor that had burned mysteriously weeks after a local woman accused the owners of theft and mistreatment. No one believed her. No arrests were made. In central Illinois, a young man claimed he had once worked for a family of medical undertakers who demanded silence, loyalty, and regular disappearances. The man disappeared 2 days after meeting with Dr. Harrison. Each clue was thin. Nothing could hold up in court. But taken together, they told a story. The Hartwells had planted roots. Audience prompt. Slowly, with gravity. The most terrifying monsters aren't the ones that scream. They're the ones that teach. Do you think this story ends in Oregon? If you believe this horror may have continued, pause now and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and let's keep following the trail. A growing obsession. Dr. Harrison's health declined, but his resolve only grew stronger. He began writing letters to federal marshals, senators, and judges, warning them of what he believed, that murder was being industrialized in the American heartland. He compiled reports of similar deaths, poisonings, surgical experimentation, and entire families disappearing after entering a town's care. He compared maps, names, timelines. It became his life's work. And still, most people called him delusional. The Hartwells were gone, they said. But Harrison knew better. One final discovery. In 1852, while visiting a small Indiana township, Harrison made one final discovery. He was shown a journal, written by a teenage boy who had died of a sudden illness. The boy's final entries mentioned a neighbor's family who often invited strangers into their home, claiming to offer healing through experimental treatments. His last entry simply read, "Greater than, they told me not to tell anyone. But I'm scared. I think they're watching me now." 2 weeks later, that house burned to the ground. The family was never seen again. And the townspeople refused to speak about it. Harrison took the journal and added it to his growing collection of reports. He never solved the mystery. But he knew what he had found. Another apprentice. Emotional reflection. Dr. Harrison died quietly in 1853. Among his belongings were over 2,000 pages of handwritten notes, maps, letters, interviews, and sketches. He called it his American Catalog of Hidden Deaths. Most of it was never published. The world wasn't ready, but pieces of it survived, filed away in government archives, waiting to be rediscovered. Haunting thought. Spoken softly. We think of evil as something rare, something obvious. But the Hartwell family taught us the truth. Evil wears a warm smile. It shakes your hand at church. It opens its doors during your grief. And waits until no one's watching. Audience prompt. Whispered. Have you ever wondered what your local funeral home does behind closed doors? Would you know if your community harbored secrets? Let us know in the comments. This story isn't just a tale from the past, it's a warning. Transition to Part 7 Hook. In Part 7, we revisit Millbrook, 2 decades after the Hartwells disappeared. Locals say the building still stands. Some say the basement was never fully sealed. And others claim they still hear footsteps in the cellar. Is the Hartwell house truly abandoned? Or has something returned? Join us next time as we go back to where it all began. NCTA. If you're still with us, thank you. These stories matter because they remind us that the past is not dead. It waits. Hit the like button, subscribe to follow this terrifying journey, and share with someone who loves the dark corners of history. They said the house was empty. They said the evil was gone. But 20 years later, someone reopened the cellar. Main narrative. Part 7, Return to Millbrook. In the spring of 1867, a government land surveyor named Jacob Elkins was sent to the abandoned town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania to assess the condition of old properties for potential auction. The town had become a ghost of its former self. Weeds pushed through cobblestone streets, homes sagged from disrepair, and nature had reclaimed what man had forgotten. But standing in the middle of that decay, untouched by time, was the Hartwell funeral parlor. The paint had peeled, the shutters hung loose, but the stone walls, solid, cold, watching. Locals in nearby towns whispered that the house was cursed, that it had never been truly empty. Jacob Elkins didn't believe in curses. He believed in land value. Discovery of the basement door. Elkins entered the parlor through the warped front door. Dust blanketed every surface. Cobwebs hung like curtains. And yet, it didn't feel empty. In the back of the building, behind what used to be the embalming room, Jacob found a wooden trapdoor. Its edges were scorched, as if someone had tried to burn it shut. But the metal hinges were intact. And when he pried it open, the air that rushed out was cold as winter breath. He descended into the basement with a lantern and a journal. He wanted to document everything. But he only wrote one entry before the pages stopped. Greater than, there's another room down here. Behind the wall. Something's still alive. The deputy's account. When Jacob didn't return, a local deputy named Walter Griggs went looking for him. He found Elkins' horse tied outside the funeral parlor. Inside, the house was silent. Griggs followed the open trapdoor into the cellar, and what he saw would haunt him forever. The basement was cracked and rotted, but there was a clear hole in the stone wall. A passage had been reopened. And just beyond it, lay Jacob Elkins' journal, his lantern still flickering weakly. But Jacob was gone. No signs of struggle, no blood, no footprints, just the journal, and a strange series of markings carved into the wall. Symbols, letters, diagrams of human anatomy, and one chilling message scratched deep into the stone. Greater than, we never left. Audience prompt. Spoken calmly but ominously. If this story gives you chills, take a moment to pause and share it. Someone needs to hear it. Because the past doesn't stay buried. It waits for someone to dig it up. Mysterious disappearances. Following Elkins' disappearance, 3 more men were sent to Millbrook. 2 surveyors and a foreman. All 3 vanished without a trace. Authorities eventually declared the funeral parlor unsafe and sealed it permanently. Or so they claimed. In 1870, teenagers from a nearby township dared each other to spend the night in the Hartwell house. Only one came out. He was found at dawn, naked, shaking, covered in cuts, and unable to speak ever again. The boy died in an asylum 10 years later. On his deathbed, he finally spoke one sentence. Greater than, she sang to me in the dark. She said the table was ready. Reawakening. For decades, no one touched the property. But in 1883, a developer from Pittsburgh bought the land with plans to convert the parlor into a hotel. Work crews began excavation and found the collapsed cave system behind the house. They cleared debris, broke through sealed walls, and unknowingly reopened the tunnel's drive. Harrison had discovered, by the 3rd day of construction, 5 workers quit. By the end of the week, 2 had disappeared. The developer was found hanged in the attic. His suicide note read, greater than, I saw the drawings. I saw the jars. I heard her voice below. I opened something I cannot close. The project was abandoned. Again. Lingering evil. Local folklore calls the Hartwell house the mourner's watch. They say you can still see shadows through the boarded-up windows. Lantern light flickering beneath the floorboards. Soft whispers behind the stone. Some believe Rebecca Hartwell never left. That her soul, or something worse, remains in that basement laboratory, waiting for someone to continue the work. The journals were never found. The preserved specimens never recovered. And according to old maps, parts of the tunnel system extend miles into the hills. Uncharted, undisturbed, for now. Final reflection, quiet and haunting. Some places are more than haunted. They're hungry. And the Hartwell funeral parlor. It remembers every visitor. Because not every evil dies with the body. Some evil is inherited. Tease for Part 8. In Part 8, we follow a modern historian who receives drive. Harrison's lost journals in the mail, 120 years after his death. Who sent them, and why do the pages still smell faintly of formaldehyde? The truth is never fully buried. And this time, it's coming back. Call to action. If this story kept you on edge, hit that like button to support the channel, subscribe for more historical horror, and leave a comment with your theories about what's still hidden beneath Millbrook. And remember, the Hartwells may be gone, but their secrets are not. They said it was all in the past. A forgotten case buried in government files. But then, a package arrived. No return address. Just a name. Drive. Samuel Harrison. Main narrative. Part 8, The Return of the Journal. In the fall of 2023, a historical archivist named Lena Morell was working at the Pennsylvania Historical Society in Philadelphia. She was researching forgotten medical practices from the early 1800s when she received a package delivered by hand. No tracking, no sender, no explanation. Inside was a collection of old, brittle papers, handwritten in precise cursive, and bound together with twine. Taped to the front was a faded note. Greater than, Drive, Samuel Harrison, Millbrook, 1823-1853. Do not ignore this. The papers smelled strongly of mothballs and something else, chemical. Sharp, like formaldehyde. At first, Lena thought it was a prank. Until she started reading. What Lena discovered. The writings matched known samples of Dr. Harrison's handwriting from state archives. They included descriptions of the Hartwell family, their methods, and the evidence he had gathered in Millbrook before their escape. But these documents were not in the federal archives. They contained additional journals, records never seen before, sketches of the tunnel system beneath the funeral parlor, maps of bodies never recovered, names of suspected accomplices in other states, and a list of coded initials, possible apprentices that Ezekiel Hartwell had trained to continue the work. But the final entry chilled Lena to the bone. Greater than, if these notes are ever found, they were meant to be. Evil is not confined to time. It seeks hosts across generations. The Hartwells were not the end, only the beginning. Strange happenings begin. After receiving the package, Lena began experiencing disturbing occurrences. The lights in her apartment flickered whenever she read the journal aloud. She heard scratching beneath her floorboards at night. Her cat refused to enter the room where she kept the papers. And once, while working late at the archive, she saw the shadow of a woman in a funeral dress standing in the stairwell. Lena had never been superstitious. But she was also a serious historian, and she knew this was more than folklore. She reached out to a colleague at the University of Oregon who had written a paper on serial crimes of the 1800s. What he sent her back was terrifying. Modern connections. According to records from Salem, Oregon, the Caldwell family, who were executed in 1847 for 120 murders, had left behind no known descendants. But property transfers in Missouri, Indiana, and Colorado suggested otherwise. Several families with similar funeral-related businesses had appeared in small towns across the 1850s-1870s. All with the same patterns. Multiple unexplained deaths, patients dying under anesthesia, basements sealed after suspicious fires, rumors of whispers behind walls. And then Lena found something that made her stomach twist. A recent death certificate from a town in Ohio. The funeral home listed, Hartwell and Sons Memorial Services. Established 2009. Audience prompt. Spoken calmly, curiously. Do you think it's a coincidence that a funeral home carrying the Hartwell name reappears in Ohio, a full 180 years later? Or is the family line still alive, continuing their work under new names? The Woman in Black returns. Lena decided to investigate the Ohio funeral home. She drove to the town of East Glenmore, where the modern-day Hartwell business operated. The staff was polite, professional, clean. Too clean. The woman who greeted Lena at the door had pale skin, piercing green eyes, and introduced herself as Rebecca Caldwell. Her voice was soft, almost hypnotic. Her smile never reached her eyes. When Lena mentioned her research into historical funeral practices, Rebecca nodded slowly and said, "Greater than, our family has always believed in tradition." Lena noticed something odd on the wall, a framed drawing, clearly antique, depicting an anatomical cross-section of a living human body. When she asked about it, Rebecca simply said, "Greater than, some things run in the blood." The escape. That night, Lena fled East Glenmore. She returned to Philadelphia and locked the documents away. But she was no longer the same. In the weeks that followed, she received voicemails with no audio. Her car alarm went off every night at 3:11 a.m. She found strange symbols carved into her apartment doorframe. And once, after a blackout, she awoke to find the Hartwell journal open on her kitchen table. The final page had been updated. In her own handwriting. Greater than, I opened something I cannot close. Dash dash dash. Final reflection. Quiet, thoughtful, eerie. Some stories don't end. They just wait. For the next reader. For the next listener. For the next host. The Hartwells are gone, yes. But the method lives on. Dash dash dash. Tease for Part 9. In Part 9, we go back to 1829, when Ezekiel Hartwell made contact with a mysterious European doctor who changed the family's methods forever. Who was this outsider? And did he bring ancient rituals to American soil? You won't want to miss what happens next. Dash dash dash. Call to action. If this story chilled you, please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment with your theory. Is the Hartwell bloodline still alive? Or is something even darker continuing their work? Either way, keep the lights on tonight. Because some evils are inherited. Opening hook. Spoken slowly, ominously. They were already monsters. But in 1829, someone taught them how to be worse. Someone ancient. Someone not American. This is how the Hartwell methods evolved. Dash dash dash. Opening square bracket. They were already monsters. But in 1829, someone taught them how to be worse. Someone ancient. Someone not American. This is how the Hartwell methods evolved. Dash dash dash. Main narrative. Part 9, The European Visitor. By the winter of 1829, Ezekiel Hartwell had already been perfecting his murderous operations for nearly a decade. The family had grown more disciplined, more secretive, more scientific, but that winter, something changed. A stranger arrived in Millbrook. A tall, pale man who spoke fluent English with a thick Germanic accent. He introduced himself only as Dr. Lothar Kranz, a traveling medical scholar from Vienna, recently arrived in America. No one in town knew who had invited him, but he was a guest at the Hartwell home within days. Dash dash dash. The man with the silver case. Dr. Kranz carried a polished silver medical case unlike anything locals had seen before. He claimed to be studying mortality preservation and pain manipulation. Most of the townspeople dismissed him as eccentric, but those close to the Hartwells noticed something odd. The family stopped attending church during Kranz's stay. Strange chants were heard at night from the hills behind the funeral parlor. And one neighbor swore she saw a body being moved into the woods, and a different one brought back. Kranz wasn't there to learn. He was there to teach. Dash dash dash. A darker discipline. Thomas Creed would later tell Drive Harrison that Kranz showed the Hartwells how to cross a line they hadn't dared approach. He introduced experimental paralytics derived from obscure European herbs. Ritualistic cuts meant not to kill, but to control. And methods of preservation that allowed certain organs to remain alive, long after the victim had died. He also spoke of something he called the transference theory, the belief that pain, fear, and death, when properly harvested, could extend the mental clarity and vitality of the one who induced it. Ezekiel Hartwell was fascinated, and obsessed. Dash dash dash. The journal changes. Before 1829, the Hartwell murder journal was scientific. After Kranz, it became ritualistic. Entries began to include symbols, incantations, and fear measurements. Rebecca, then only 11 years old, began drawing diagrams of the nervous system with notations in Latin and Old German. Josiah and Caleb started referring to victims not as bodies, but as instruments. And Martha Hartwell began keeping a second book, one bound in red leather and written in what appeared to be coded scripture. Dash dash dash. What happened to Dr. Kranz? He stayed for nearly 6 months. Then, in May of 1830, he vanished. No goodbyes, no wagon, no trace. The Hartwells claimed he had left in the night to return to Boston. But according to Thomas Creed, that wasn't true. Creed claimed he once saw Ezekiel and Martha in the woods behind the property, digging a grave and burning pages of a leather-bound book that reeked of chemicals and something worse. Years later, when Dr. Harrison examined the tunnel system beneath the funeral parlor, he found a sealed iron coffin hidden behind a false wall. Too heavy to move, too dangerous to open. On its lid was carved a name. Greater than, Kranz. Dash dash dash. What did Kranz teach them? According to Dr. Harrison's hidden papers, the Hartwells' killings after 1830 took on a new pattern. Victims were kept alive longer. Many were drained of blood. Slowly, autopsies were conducted on still living bodies. And the family's experiments shifted from murder to soul manipulation. One drawing shows a human face split open, with notations about emotion extraction through ocular entry. Another describes a ritual that must be performed under the third moon following the winter solstice to preserve the suffering. The Hartwells had gone beyond medicine, beyond murder. They had embraced something ancient, something occult. Audience prompt, spoken darkly, contemplatively. Who was Dr. Kranz? Was he simply a twisted European scientist? Or something older, something that had worn the mask of medicine for centuries? Is it possible that the Hartwells weren't the first, only the next? The Vienna Files. In 1998, a set of untranslated journals was discovered in a burned-out monastery near Graz, Austria. They dated back to 1771. One name appeared repeatedly across the pages. Greater than Lothar Kranz, the collector. The notes described a cult of medical elites who believed that death, when administered with precision and ritual, could channel energy into the surgeon. They called it Die Wissenschaft des Schmerzes, the science of pain. The Hartwells may have been America's first students of this doctrine. But they weren't the last. Final reflection, quiet, unnerving voice. Every generation brings its monsters. But some monsters aren't born. They're trained, taught, conditioned to believe that death is a means, not an end. And sometimes, those teachings are passed like heirlooms. From one doctor to the next. From one family, to another. Tease for part 10, the final episode. In the chilling conclusion of The Hartwell Funeral Parlor, we return to the present day. Where a body has just been found. One that matches Drive, Kranz's preserved profile. But it's fresh, it's breathing, and it's wearing a name tag that says, Visitor. Don't miss part 10, the terrifying final chapter that may prove the Hartwell legacy never ended. Call to action. If this story got under your skin, please like, share, and subscribe. Comment below with your theories. Was Kranz human? Or something else entirely? And remember, some knowledge should never be passed down. But once it's opened, it can never be closed. The Hartwells were executed in 1847. Their crimes, documented. Their legacy, buried. But evil doesn't die. It waits. And in the spring of 2023, it returned. Main narrative. Part 10, The Visitor. In a quiet corner of rural Washington state, a construction crew working near the base of an old mountain road unearthed something unusual, a sealed iron coffin, engraved with symbols that no one recognized. The site had once been a Quaker burial ground, long forgotten. But this coffin wasn't like the others. It was airtight, cold, and when the county coroner pried it open, greater than the body inside blinked. The breathing corpse. He was tall, pale, and appeared to be in his mid-40s. But his heart had no rhythm. His blood, when tested, showed signs of 19th century embalming chemicals. And in his coat pocket was a folded piece of parchment. The writing was in Latin, Old German, and flawless 19th century cursive. It read, Greater than, he sleeps only when the work is done. Greater than, the Hartwells were merely the beginning. At the bottom was a symbol, a six-pointed star carved around a serpent devouring a heart. The same symbol Drive, Harrison had drawn in his journals. The symbol of Dr. Lothar Kranz. Federal involvement. The discovery made its way to Washington, D.C., where a small, secretive division of the federal government began reviewing old files. Files that included Drive, Samuel Harrison's 1830 reports. Files, labeled, The Hartwell Case, reopened. The man in the coffin was transferred to a secure military facility in Oregon. Doctors ran tests. Linguists tried to translate his murmurs. And a former medical historian was brought in to analyze the body's tattoos, each one matching the notes from the red leather ritual book found in Millbrook in 1830. Modern Hartwells. Around the same time, reports began to surface from small-town funeral homes across Ohio, Indiana, and Missouri. The pattern was chillingly familiar. Sudden closures of family-run parlors. Disappearances of transient workers and the elderly. An unexplained increase in closed casket services. And in every case, a quiet young woman, pale, soft-spoken, with dark eyes, was seen assisting in preparations. One witness, an intern from a Kansas City mortuary, identified her in a photo lineup. The name she gave, greater than Rebecca Caldwell, a legacy of evil. The Hartwell bloodline may have died in 1847. But their knowledge, their rituals, their methods, didn't. It moved underground. It spread. And it adapted. In the modern era, where medical records are digitized, cremation is common, and small-town deaths often go unnoticed, there are fewer questions. Fewer autopsies. More shadows to hide in. Dr. Harrison's final warning. Among Drive, Harrison's archived papers, investigators found a sealed letter dated 1852, just 1 year before his death. He wrote, "Greater than, if you are reading this, then the Hartwells have returned. Or worse, someone trained by them has. Greater than, do not dismiss the signs. Ritual murders do not end in fire or rope. Greater than, they persist in silence. Greater than, look for the patterns. Greater than, and if you find them, run. The missing file. Today, most files related to the Hartwell family remain sealed under the Federal Medical Ethics and Containment Act. Only a handful of people know the full truth. But one page is missing from the archives. A page that listed active apprentices Kranz had trained during his time in America. 3 names were legible, the 4th, greater than redacted, and below it, one final phrase in Kranz's handwriting. Greater than, the science lives on. Modern connection, second coffin. In June 2024, a hiker in Colorado discovered another sealed coffin embedded in the hillside beneath a long-abandoned church. Same metal, same symbol. This time, it was empty. At its base, scratched into the stone, were the words. Greater than, he is walking. Audience reflection, spoken with eerie calm. So, what do you think? Did the Hartwells truly die in 1847? Or did their teachings live on, passed hand to hand, generation to generation? Are they just a dark chapter of the past? Or are they still practicing, under different names, in towns we trust? Would you recognize them? Would you even know it if your local mortician was one of them? Call to action, final words. If this series chilled you, share it with someone who thinks all small towns are safe. Leave your theories below. Who is Dr. Kranz? And where is the empty coffin's occupant now? And if you want more true-sounding fiction that blurs the line between horror and history, subscribe, hit the bell, and stay curious. Because the past is never really dead. Sometimes.